Tonight, married to a monster, how Giselle Pellico went from rape survivor to feminist hero. 51 men were sentenced to more than 400 years in jail for repeatedly attacking her. After a very public trial, she said she had no regrets.
I'm thinking about all the other families affected by this case and the non-recognised victims. In these stories that are often in the shadows, you must know you share my struggle.
Her then-husband is now behind bars for 20 years, but many women think the sentences are too lenient.
We feel like the justice is bad today.
Justice is not done for the women.
Giselle said she wanted the world to know what happened to her. Has her bravery changed the country forever? Also tonight, we report from the devastated French island of Mayotte as an angry resident confronts President Macron. And a dystopian future or a nightmare present? Filmmaker Asif Kapadia on his new film and why we should be worried about Elon Musk possibly funding the Reform Party. That's all coming up on The World with me, Gillian Joseph. Good evening. I want to begin the programme tonight with the words of Giselle Pellico, delivered on the witness stand during the trial that rocked France. Giving evidence, she said, "Shame must change sides. I want the world to remember my name." That rallying cry and her decision to speak publicly started a national conversation about consent and violence against women. The fact that consent is even being discussed is a huge shift. In France, only 10% of victims of sexual violence lodge a complaint. 94% of complaints are dismissed. Consent is not mentioned specifically in rape legislation. And what of the 51 men, including Giselle's husband, Dominique? They've been described as Mr. Everyman, a variety of ages, jobs and experience. Activists say many of their sentences are too lenient. Tonight, we'll examine how their actions were enabled by French society. Our first report from Europe correspondent Siobhan Robbins contains details of rape and sexual abuse.
Arriving at court to a chorus of support, Giselle Pellico, a woman subjected to around 200 rapes, proud to show her face. She is exceptional. Her attackers are not. Men hiding behind masks with bags packed for prison. Prudent planning in the end. Because 50 men, alongside Dominique Pellico, Giselle's ex-husband, were given jail sentences totaling more than 400 years. A victory for the woman they tried to make the victim.
Je pense aussi à toutes les autres familles touchées par ce drame.
I'm thinking about all the families affected by this case and the unnamed victims in these stories who are often in the shadows. You should know we share the same struggle. I have faith we can take hold of a future in which everybody, men and women, can live together in harmony and respect and mutual understanding.
Dominique was given a 20-year sentence, the sick conductor in an orchestra of abuse.
He's aware of the trauma and the tsunami that this has caused them, and he regrets it. He's expressed this from the moment he was taken into custody.
Dominique invited men to their home in the pretty village of Mazan and filmed them raping a sedated Giselle, supporting their mother, 3 children devastated by the sins of their father, a man who will likely die in prison.
This trial was a very difficult ordeal. I think first of all of my 3 children, David, Caroline and Florian, and my grandchildren. It was also for them that I fought this battle.
In text to his fellow rapists, Dominique showed no remorse. In one message to one of the convicted men, Patrick A., in 2018, Dominique Pellicot wrote, "I'm looking for a kinky accomplice to abuse my wife at home who is asleep." To another, Redouan E., he said, "Make sure you wait and check that she's fast asleep." This premeditated predator was caught by chance after he was spotted filming up women's skirts by a security guard, leading police to uncover 20,000 images of abuse by one of France's worst sex offenders. The trial may be over, but questions remain. At least 11 men filmed by Dominique Pellicot have yet to be identified. They are still free. They are the fathers, the brothers, the husbands that walk among us. On the edge of the village where Giselle was repeatedly raped, this centre helps similar survivors of abuse. Latika found out her own husband had been drugging and raping her, dosing her drinks, just like Dominique.
Et dans la nuit, je me réveille, il est sur moi.
In the middle of the night, I woke up and he was on top of me, raping me, she said. He was close to finishing the act and I was shocked, paralysed. I didn't understand what was happening to me. But after Giselle spoke out, she decided to do the same. She's helped women, especially me, to find their voice and speak out about what's happened to them without shame. Getting justice has taken 4 years, so for some of the guilty, there was no more prison time left to serve. Instead, they faced public punishment as they walked to freedom. No such reception for Giselle. For hers is the only name here that will be remembered. Giselle Pellicot, the woman who forced France to talk about rape.
And Siobhan joins me now. Siobhan, we heard from Latika at the end of your report there, who says she was raped and her complaint dismissed by authorities. Is the hope that this case will change how sexual violence is viewed and prosecuted?
Yes, many of the people that I've spoken to, whether it's outside the court or on the protests in support of Giselle, have said they really want change. One of the areas that they want change in is this area around consent in the rape law. Consent isn't part of the rape law here. Some people say that needs to be added. Others say that there needs to be more awareness, particularly Giselle Pellicot and her family, of drugging and rape and taking away this idea that this only happens if you're in a club and someone spikes your drink. And that is something that the government has already started making steps on. So they're trying to invest more in providing test kits to people who believe they might have been drugged and raped. But I think if we're talking about Giselle Pellicot's legacy, then her legacy is Latika. It is that woman who has been raped by her partner and feels that the police haven't listened, but is empowered to go back and make another complaint. It is the woman that I met on the march in Paris who was raped and said, I will now be reporting that. It's the women who told me, I wish I could talk to my younger self and say, be brave, report this, stop this. And if that is Giselle Pellicot's legacy, if it is a societal belief change, a cultural change, then that is a massive step forward, both for France, but for any other society around the world that manages to make that step.
Siobhan, for the moment, thank you. But Siobhan, you're going to stay with us as we discuss the impact of this case. But let's talk now about the 51 men who were on trial in that court in Avignon. I want to take you through some of the excuses they gave for raping Giselle Pellicot. Some say they were drugged. Others insisted Dominique Pellicot had given consent on behalf of his wife. Many said they thought Giselle was a willing participant in a sex game. I've been speaking to the court-appointed psychiatrist who examined Dominique after his arrest. I asked Laurent Layette what his assessment was when they first met.
I was surprised. Surprised by the difference between somebody who presented himself
d'un vieux monsieur tout à fait bien intégré,
a an older man, very well versed in society, well integrated.
Et qui, de notre côté, s'était fait attraper
But on
dans un
the
grand
other
magasin
hand, he'd been
en train de filmer sous
found
les jupes de
in
jeunes
a
femmes.
supermarket filming under women's skirts.
Et je n'ai pas retrouvé à ce moment-là chez
And at
lui
that time, I didn't find in him
de maladie psychiatrique,
any signs of psychological illness.
mais j'ai communiqué avec la juge
But I communicated with the judge
pour lui dire que j'étais très très
to say
étonné
that I was very astonished
de la différence entre la présentation
by the difference between the presentation
de Dominique Pellicot
of Dominic Pellicot
et les faits qui lui étaient reprochés à l'époque.
and the fact that the actual events that he was being reproached for at the time.
Did you find evidence, therefore, of a split personality, that he had two different personas?
Tout à fait.
Yes, absolutely.
Lorsque j'ai été amené à réexaminer
When I
M. Pellicot,
re-examined Mr. Pellicot,
j'ai pu trouver ce
I
qu'on appelle en
found
français
what we call in French
un clivage.
a cleavage, so a split.
C'est un split en anglais, c'est-à-dire qu'il y avait un
So
monsieur
this means that
Pellicot
there was Mr. Pellicot,
qui était un vieux monsieur,
the older
bien
man,
inséré dans la société,
very well integrated in society.
et
But
il
on
y
the
avait
other
un autre
hand,
monsieur
there was
Pellicot
another Mr. Pellicot
qui s'adonnait à des déviances sexuelles
who was a sexual deviant,
lorsqu'il recrutait des individus
recruiting individuals
par Internet
through the internet
et qu'il mettait en présence de sa femme pour la violer.
bringing them to his home to rape his wife.
And were you able to ascertain that the source for this deviant behaviour?
Les sources, il y en a plusieurs.
There are several
Les
sources.
réponses à ces questions, on les
The answer to
trouve
this question is found
d'abord dans le passé
firstly
de
in
M.
his
Pellicot.
past, Mr. Pellicot's past.
C'est quelqu'un qui a vécu
He is
au moins
someone
à deux
who has gone
reprises
through at least two
des agressions sexuelles lorsqu'il était enfant.
sexual attacks when he was a child.
C'est quelqu'un qui a été témoin
Somebody who was a witness also
d'agressions sexuelles
to sexual
de
abuse
son père sur sa mère.
from his father on his mother,
Et c'est quelqu'un qui
and also somebody
avait une adoration
who
aussi pour sa femme,
also loved his wife,
mais à un moment
but
donné de leur histoire de
at a
couple,
certain moment in their story as a couple,
sa femme lui a échappé puisqu'elle a
his
voulu partir
wife actually
pour
wanted to
s'installer avec
leave,
un autre homme.
wanted to actually live with another man,
Et ça, M. Pellicot ne l'a pas
and
supporté.
Mr. Pellicot could not stand that.
But let's pause now and focus on how rape is defined under French law. It's described as sexual penetration committed against another person by violence, constraint, threat or surprise. You'll notice there is no mention of consent. Last year, France blocked an attempt to make non-consensual sex a criminal offence across the European Union. The hope is that the Pellicot case will lead to a change in legislation. Sky's digital producer, Lucy Marley, has been speaking to women across France during and after the trial.
So I've just been walking around the little town of Mazan, which is where Giselle and Dominique lived for many years. And it is so beautiful here. It's so quiet, it's so peaceful. It's quite hard to comprehend that such awful abuse happened here. But Giselle was to ignite a movement of teenagers to grandmothers, women across the country and the world, shocked at what they heard, but determined to show their support.
I'm here to protest for women's rights, here for our rights and the rights of the women of all around the world.
Thousands of people are protesting across France today to demand an end to sexual violence.
I mean, I'm supposed to be a judge, you know, and I'm a devil because the justice system is corrupt.
I want to express my anger against patriarchy.
We need to be listened.
I'm on the march in Paris and it's pretty long, it's around 2 miles, but people are singing, they're chanting, they're dancing, and they're calling for real change.
It feels good to fight in an atmosphere that is not sad always. And this day, it's like a representation of the fight.
I think this is hope. This what is going to happen now.
It's beautiful and the atmosphere it's good because we are all different.
So we're in the car park, which is near their old family home. Dominique would tell some of the men to park here so it wasn't suspicious and they wouldn't be seen near the family home. And he would meet them here, and it was all planned very meticulously. Dominique was drugging Giselle and would clean her body after the attacks. He also gave these 50 men orders so she would not wake. Giselle, who has no memory of the abuse, decided to take on her husband in court, waiving her right to anonymity, and through the terror of the trial, she's become a symbol of the fight against sexual violence.
Oh, Giselle Pellico, she's a very strong and powerful woman, and I think it's beautiful to see her make the case public. She's a queen.
Giselle Pellico is catalyst of revolution.
Giselle Pellico, she's an icon. She's an icon. That's it.
Like an example of strength and patience and a role model for the young girls.
I do feel hopeful, yeah. We're thousands and thousands of people outside, so I do feel hopeful.
As a man coming here, how important is it for men to show their support?
It's quite important. I mean, I asked all my friends, but actually I'm all alone. This is how important it is to me. Like, even if they are not with me, I'm there.
I just arrived, so I'm going to run to the cars where there are musics and feminist anthems.
Merci.
Have a nice day.
So it's finally the day of the verdict here in Avignon, and there's so many people here. There's lots of police, there's lots of press, there's lots of people who show their support for Giselle. And this feels like a huge day, not only for Giselle, but for the whole of France.
So we are with her from the beginning to the end.
Originally from Austria, and I've come from Porto in Portugal.
And I'm from Cologne in Germany.
Because we have to speak up and explain the situation in France.
It is very important for the women. They can do this.
Well, I'm a survivor of sexual abuse myself, like many women, men and children are, and I feel just such a deep gratitude for Giselle because she's given all of us a face. She's like me too, with a face, and with a face full of love and dignity and care for the world.
I also have a lot of rape in my childhood, so for me, when I was sitting in the coffee and reading a newspaper, and I read this first sentence, "A shame has to change the side," and something happened in me, and I said, wow, this is the most important sentence I ever heard for this.
At around 8 a.m, people start arriving. Giselle's daughter and 2 sons are first. Some defendants. And finally, Giselle. She's looking to her right and she's thanking all her supporters as she arrives. Because we're outside, we don't get the news as quickly. But the 47 men who were on trial for rape, 2 for sexual assault and 2 for attempted rape were found guilty.
The men were declared guilty. That is huge, and I know it is not the amount of years that we expected, and it is, but we are seeing some steps forward.
We see bigger than just the sentences. Okay, it is less than what we hoped, but still our hopes are bigger than just what the sentences are.
I think we're halfway there. I think I cannot say that it has been done completely, but at least we're seeing something moving forward, and we see the needle moving forward.
All of the men's lawyers appear outside, and tensions start rising really quickly. Because the trial's been going on for years, there's a few men who've already served their prison sentence and were free to leave today. This was one of those men.
Since think it's a shame. I really think it's a shame because 6 of them will leave the palace here free. How it's possible? It's just incredible.
We are very angry because sorry, but I've shouted too much.
Not that well. We feel like the justice is bad today.
Justice is not done for the women.
I think she's coming.
When Giselle leaves court, she's escorted by the police and security. They're literally a human shield around her. Everyone is fighting to see her.
Thank you! Thank you, Giselle! Thank you, Giselle! Thank you! Nos amis anglais from London!
And then she's gone. It's been a really emotional day at court today, and there'll be some people who'll say the sentencing wasn't long enough for the men found guilty, but you can't deny the impact that Giselle has had on France, but also around the world. But I think specifically survivors of sexual assault and rape, they would have seen her fight for justice in front of the world, and I'm sure her name will go down in history. If Giselle happens to watch this, which, maybe she will, what would you say to her?
Women here, women so many places are just incredibly proud of what she's done.
Thank you, you're strong, Giselle.
Thank you, Giselle.
Thank you. And I think that is the best conclusion for this.
Thank you. Thank you for all the women, the women of the world.
Lucy Marley reporting now. Let's bring in gender equality activist Cynthia Illouz, who founded the digital platform Women's Voices. Welcome to you. Thank you for joining us. Wonder if you can share your thoughts tonight, knowing that Dominique Pellicot is beginning a 20-year jail sentence.
Yeah, I was in the court this morning in Avignon, and yes, indeed, he was convicted to 20 years. But what we were looking for is to understand what will be the other sentences, because so many men are involved in this case, 50 in front of the justice today. As mentioned earlier, the sentences were less important, less severe than the prosecution asked for, but she really made a very strong impact on France for the fight against violence against women. So this is a new era that is opening, but we are still waiting for the next 10 days to know if those men will make an appeal. If they will appeal, there will be maybe another trial in the following months.
Yes, and as we heard in our report, some of the criticism has been that the sentences of the 50 men have been too lenient.
Yes, exactly. And, they were almost convicted for aggravated rape today with aggravated circumstances, and the subject of chemical submission were not sustained for every man. In the court, it was really tense. The men came, they were wearing masks, they came with their own bag because a few of them knew already they probably gonna spend the night in jail. So it was at the end of 4 intense months, but also the opening of a great discussion about this topic here in France.
And what was the atmosphere like in court? What was the demeanour of the men, not least Dominique Pellicot?
Yeah, we were, as journalists, we broadcast the sentences in another room because no journalists were allowed inside the same courtroom today because there were so many policemen ready to lock them down with the handcuff because obviously there were a lot of men convicted today. But the president of the court, Roger Arata, called them one by one and they stood up to hear their conviction. The room was very quiet. There were no shouts, except after we heard about the wives and maybe the companion of the men convicted who cried. I saw one of her cried inside the arm of her lawyer.
And what was your view on how the trial was conducted and the terminology that was used?
At the very beginning, we were all gathering because we observe what we call the rape culture, the way they talk about the victim, the way they blame the victim. That is something that we find sadly globally, asking questions about, the way victims are wearing their clothes, what are the acts. So the rape culture is really something that we are observing in France, but also abroad. We're talking about sexism acts and also a range of other violence, including what we call here feminicide. It means women are killed because they are women. And this is all of those acts that we were able to observe in the court. But also, as you mentioned, the vocabulary used by the different lawyers, even the judge, were shocking. And what Gisèle Pellicot allowed is for us to be able to know exactly what happened behind the closed door of justice and to be able to fight that for the future.
OK, Cynthia Luz, thank you very much for sharing your experience with us and your expertise. Thank you. Well, back to Siobhan now in Avignon. Siobhan, let's focus on the concrete changes that could come from this. How big a problem is drug rape in France and what's being done to address it, do you think?
I think that's a really interesting question because we simply don't know the scale of this problem. And that's why this case has been so fundamental, because it really highlighted the fact that this isn't just happening in clubs to people whose drinks are getting spiked. It's happening often in relationships from people that you know, just like rape. We're told all the time that most people know their rapist, and it's exactly the same with drug rape. And it's interesting that I was seeing one of the main anonymous hotlines here that women can ring, 3919, has said since this case has been ongoing, it's seen a huge rise in women and other victims ringing in and saying, I think I've been drugged and raped. So this case has clearly brought that into the public eye. In terms of concrete changes, well, actually, because of this case, the government did already announce some measures to try and make it easier for people to access tests. Some of the changes have been delayed because of the political upheaval going on in France, but there is, it seems, a movement towards making this more high profile, and that's certainly something that Gisèle and her family would be keen to see happen.
And Siobhan, this is a trial that has rocked France, the world. What's your sense about whether we'll actually see a shift in society, in how sexual violence is viewed?
Listen, rape is a crime that's as old as the world. And this case will not change it happening. But what this case has changed is that it's getting people here in France talking about it. It wasn't long ago that rape was kind of a private matter that was kept within relationships. Now it's being talked about on the television, openly in court. And I think Gisèle Pellicot making that really brave choice to waive her anonymity has meant not only that those conversations are supercharged and being talked about at the highest echelons, but also the other people are seeing her example and doing the same. And the more that happens, the more often that we're going to be talking about rape and really following out that idea that Giselle had, which is that shame must change sides. Shame cannot be with the victim. They cannot feel that they can't talk about what's happened because they feel ashamed that somehow it's their fault. It has to be pushed back on the rapist. And I think the other really important thing that she said is that this has to be a conversation not just between women, but between everyone in society. And she was keen to underline that as well today. And so I think if those things continue, then that can only ever be a positive step. And also the fact that now her case was looked into by the police, and now perhaps more women, when they go, because of this case, when they go to the police and they say, I think this might have happened, perhaps the police will take these cases more seriously now.
Siobhan, thank you. You're watching The World with me, Gillian Joseph. Still to come. Is Vladimir Putin ready to talk about a ceasefire with Ukraine? We'll have the headlines from his annual news conference. A new appointment from Sir Keir Starmer with global implications. Lord Peter Mandelson is set to become the next ambassador to the United States.
I'm David Blevins, and I'm Sky's senior Ireland correspondent. It takes 60 minutes to cross the Irish Sea. It took the British monarchy a century. I've spent 30 years reporting the journey from conflict to peace.
The political parties of Northern Ireland have reached agreement.
If there's anyone who might know how to fix Northern Ireland's devolved government, it's the American architect.
Changes in circumstance require changes in approach.
The end of the political stalemate, the start of a new chapter for Northern Ireland.
I confirm that I am willing to take up the office of First Minister. My election to the post of First Minister demonstrates the change that's happening on this island.
Catholics and Protestants on different sides, now facing the same threat.
If we both contract COVID-19 and end up in hospital, religion's nothing.
People here are adept at finding hope amid adversity. That's the spirit of a place that punches way above its weight. We help you understand the world with us. A toxic blue-green algae now poisoning Loch Ness. It's breaking your heart what has happened here.
It is.
This is a vital resource, a national treasure, now fighting for its very life. They are effectively surrounded by Northern Ireland, and that makes this the most unlikely of international frontiers.
If there's a hard border, I think it'll cripple the country.
Winter is coming. Welcome to Winterfell. It's an iconic location in this globally acclaimed drama. Ophelia was the most powerful hurricane this far east in the Atlantic on record. Sky News, the full story first.
Day of this conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
Just want a job in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty? I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party.
I'm Neville Lazarus and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
We've got your Sunday mornings covered. From the front page and the sounds of the streets to the voices of the people who make the major calls and big picture politics beyond Westminster. We'll put you at the heart of our story. A new start to Sunday.
I'm ready. Are you?
Join me, Trevor Phillips, Sunday mornings on Sky News. Welcome back. Could Vladimir Putin be ready to talk about a ceasefire in Ukraine?
Today, the Russian president hinted that he may be ready to make concessions. He was speaking at his annual news conference involving questions from interviewers, the press and the public. The question is, how sincere was the Russian leader being? Our Moscow correspondent Ivor Bennett was in the room and sent us this report.
This is Vladimir Putin's happy place, centre stage at his annual press conference come phone-in. It's a chance to play problem solver in chief. No matter the issue, Vlad will fix it. That includes Ukraine, where for the first time he signalled a willingness to make concessions.
We've always said that we're ready for both negotiations and compromises. It's just that the other side, literally and figuratively, refused to negotiate. We are always ready for this. The result of negotiations is always a compromise.
He came prepared to talk about the war, asking members of the audience to unveil a military banner he had brought along. And his tone was bullish, claiming Russia was close to achieving its goals and that the conflict had actually made Moscow stronger. Whenever Vladimir Putin talks about the war in Ukraine now, he has a certain confidence, of verbal swagger almost. And that's because he knows that Russia has the upper hand on the battlefield, and he believes that means he'll have the stronger hand come any negotiations. At one point, he even suggested a missile duel to test Western defences against this, Russia's new hypersonic weapon, Oreshnik. From Ukraine, a blunt response.
He said, we will strike somewhere in Kyiv with Oreshnik, this new missile, and let them install air defence and see what happens. Do you think that's a sane person? Total nut jobs.
He was also asked about Syria, where the fall of Assad has meant the future of Russia's military bases are in doubt. Despite failing to keep their man in power, he denied this was a defeat.
You want to present everything that is happening in Syria as some kind of failure, a defeat for Russia. I assure you that this is not the case, and I will tell you why. We came to Syria 10 years ago so that a terrorist enclave would not be created there. In general, we have achieved our goal.
Unfortunately, I didn't achieve mine. After 4.5 hours, not a single question. But here's hoping for one next year. Ivor Bennett, Sky News, Moscow.
To domestic politics now, and as Sir Keir Starmer prepares for a Trump presidency, Sky News understands he's expected to appoint Lord Peter Mandelson as the UK's new ambassador to Washington. Our chief political correspondent John Craig is with me now in the studio. And how surprising an appointment would this be, John?
It's not a total surprise, but that doesn't mean it's not controversial because he's a divisive figure. Now, we understand there was, for the past month or so, there's been a short list of 4, which Mr Mandelson, or Lord Mandelson as he now is, was the front runner. So Peter Mandelson, David Miliband, former Foreign Secretary, Baroness Amos, former International Development Secretary under Tony Blair, and Baroness Ashton, who is also, like Lord Mandelson, a former Brussels Commissioner. It's his background in trade that's crucial here and has convinced Sir Keir Starmer and, crucially, his top aide, Chief of Staff Morgan McSweeney, that he's the man to talk trade with President Trump. At the liaison committee today, Sir Keir was talking about how he wanted to avoid tariffs, don't like tariffs, he said. But he's had a checkered past, Lord Mandelson. I mean, he got the nickname Prince of Darkness for his days as a spin doctor under Neil Kinnock back in the 80s, became MP for Hartlepool in 1992, joined the cabinet in 98. That was as Trade Secretary, had to quit over an undeclared bank loan, then came back as Northern Ireland Secretary, had to quit that job because of intervening in a passport application. Then, after going to Brussels as a trade commissioner, in a really surprise move, he came back. Gordon Brown, his old foe, brought him back as Deputy Prime Minister. And clearly he's back in favour with the Keir Starmer regime. It's a big appointment. Nigel Farage has said it's a good idea, but the Labour left won't like it because he's such a controversial figure. We
shall see how it's received. John, thank you very much for that update. French President Emmanuel Macron was confronted by an angry resident today as he visited the island of Mayotte. At least 31 people are reported to have died, but thousands are still missing, and aid has been slow to arrive. Ashish Joshi is live on the island for us tonight. Ashish.
It's not surprising that the French president received such a hostile reception. If he had visited some of the communities that we went to today, he would have had exactly the same reaction. There are people who are living absolutely wretched lives 5 days into the crisis, and they're still not receiving the sort of aid and care that they desperately need.
This is all that remains of Chicheni. It's a shanty town in Mayotte's capital, Mamoudzou. On Sunday, over 1,000 people had their homes here. But Cyclone Chido has reduced it to a mass of splinters, rubble and twisted metal. This is what's left of Darbine Houlihu's house, a home she shares with 8 of her family. She tells me that the morning after the cyclone, they came back to find their home completely destroyed. And since then, they've been sleeping on wet mattresses outside.
The cyclone was coming, she knew it was coming, but why did she stay here and risk her life?
Darbine didn't get any real warnings about the cyclone because she doesn't have a TV or a radio. In fact, it was her neighbor who warned her, but by then, it was too late. This neighborhood is home to mostly undocumented migrants from the Comoros Islands. They have nowhere else to go and can't turn to officials for help.
It's really hard to try and get your head around the fact that all of this mess, the timber, the corrugated sheets, these are actually people's homes, or at least this is what the cyclone has done to their homes. They have absolutely nothing left now. And this is just one street in the capital. It's like this across the island.
And this devastation is what Emmanuel Macron came to see for himself. The French president insists aid is being delivered, but his words are provoking fury from desperate islands.
I'm telling you what you've said. I heard you on the radio talking about here. It makes no sense what you say. I'm from Wangani. There's no water, no rescue services for 6 days. Do you think that's normal? You're not there. This is the reality.
You either want to talk to me.
No. Do you find that normal? No. You're not even from here.
The French president would have heard the same message here. A school converted into a camp for those left homeless by Chido. People like Ambroise Coma and his family who have lost everything. He explains that there are about 18 people staying in this room, including his family. They haven't received any help, so they've come here, and they don't know how long it'll be until there's real assistance. More aid for this devastated island has been promised, but it needs to get here fast and get to those least likely to ask for help. People like Darbine.
And I think that is the biggest challenge for this island, is reaching out to those disenfranchised, marginalized communities, with many people who are undocumented, who won't come forward and won't seek help. They're the poorest residents of this island, and they're the ones who need help the most desperately. That's one of the biggest challenges facing the authorities here. The other one is restoring power, making sure water is available, and getting the transport network up and running. Effectively, Mayotte is cut off from the rest of the region. The airport that we flew in today, organized by the military, the flight, but it was a civilian aircraft, but it remains closed to other flights in the region. So it's the military controlling all the flights that are coming in and going out. It needs to open up as much as it can so aid can arrive here. These are the sort of challenges facing the island, and the French president would have been left in no doubt, because wherever you go Around any corner, around any street, you'll be faced with the same catastrophic destruction. And people here really do need desperate help.
Ashish, thank you. Still clearly a struggle to get help to those people who need it so desperately, as you say. This is The World with me, Gillian Joseph. Next up, are we heading for dangerous times, or are they here already? I'll be speaking to filmmaker Asif Kapadia about his new docudrama.
Once almost lost, these denizens of the deep are back.
The problem for these whales is global warming. Water temperatures are rising.
We're worried that the animals are actually starting to starve.
Deadly and outdated.
What do you think should happen to the net?
I would like to see them go.
I'm Nicole Johnston, Sky's Asia correspondent, based here in Beijing.
A towering monument to the China dream and its demise.
From one end of this country to the other, China is littered with real estate that's falling apart.
China is facing a tsunami of the elderly.
We have to work as long as health allows, otherwise, no money.
China is under pressure to pay for the pensions of 500 million retirees. I've reported on a wide range of stories from around the world.
Mass protests forced the president to flee.
The sight of the president's private swimming pool only reinforces to Sri Lankans the great divide here between rich and poor.
Aid groups say Gaza is now the world's most dangerous place to be a child.
The Israeli army has raided towns and villages all over the West Bank. These tunnels run all over Gaza. The Gaza Strip is ridden with them.
The referendum designed to unite the country has only deepened its divide.
Sydney's floodplains underwater again.
This is the third or fourth time in the 18 months that their homes have gone under.
Sky News, the full story first.
It may seem like a gimmicky toy, but it is part of the global race between the United States and China for new technology. This elite engineering designed to humour and to help us.
Weeknights on Sky News.
This is your chance. Tell people. Welcome to the Politics Hub.
Our police force has apologised.
If you want to find out about Grimsby, you come to the docks.
I'm live in Jerusalem.
Are you not concerned that that could lead to all-out war?
Hello there, good evening. There are fears of an upsurge in violence. What's at stake here?
You are watching the press preview, a first look at the front pages as they arrive.
This conflict.
They keep telling us that they want aid.
And this is what's left of it.
Tanks, heavy vehicle. Why only in America?
People want their country to work.
We want to jump in a normal life.
Why are these homes empty?
I want you to be honest with people.
That has happened within minutes.
Sky News, the full story first. Free wherever you get your news.
Jubilation in the streets, while some emotional.
This is a political victory for Prime Minister Modi and his Hindu Nationalist Party.
I'm Neville Lazarus, and I'm Sky's reporter based in Delhi. Companies like these are helping India in its trajectory to be a serious player in space exploration. Sky News, get the full story first.
Welcome back. Next, an alarming vision of the future from the Oscar-winning filmmaker Asif Kapadia. His latest work, 2073, serves as a warning about the rise of populism and the growing influence of big tech on global politics. Sound familiar? Take a look.
Minorities silenced, dissenters arrested, social media cooperative.
We are worth more when we are addicted, polarized, and disinformed than if we are living, breathing, free citizens.
Where in New San Francisco have you visited?
If you don't have facts, you can't have truth. Without truth, you can't have trust.
faced wars and famines and genocides, but this is bigger than any of that.
Well, with me now, the filmmaker Asif Kapadia. That looks terrifying. It's set in the future, or is it?
Well, it's set in the future in terms of a framing device, but it's entirely constructed really out of factual footage from now. Really, it's the last 10 years. It's the 10 years of everything that's happening within the climate, politics, surveillance, tech. I just wanted to put it all into one movie.
So the themes are very pertinent, aren't they? Authoritarian forces taking over democracy, perhaps what the future might look like.
I started this film 5 years ago, and a lot of people were like, why are you making this? Everything's great. And I was like, I just got a feeling. The film came out of a feeling of what was going on, but not just in the UK. My family are from India, what's happening in India. I've worked a lot in Latin America. I work a lot in Europe. And what I was seeing and happening in the US when I was shooting a TV show there. So I wanted to do something that made it kind of connected the dots and made the links globally. Because a lot of times people make films about one character or one situation in one country. And for me, everything's linked. Everything we do is linked to somewhere else in the world.
And you say that it came from a feeling, what you were seeing around you?
Yeah, an uncomfortable feeling about what was happening. And I suppose partly it's to do with surveillance, partly it's just to do with how tech is being used and how the data and information we keep giving away, what happens to it. And, you know, I was working in the US directly afterwards. I was there during the Trump election. And I remember hearing the same three-word messaging, seeing the same people, seeing Nigel Farage, the hype man for Donald Trump. And I had no idea they all knew each other. You know, I'm so, naive in a way to think, why wouldn't they know each other? Why wouldn't they be hanging out? Here we are, the film comes out. People are funding, the same people are being funded by Elon Musk.
We'll talk about that because Nigel Farage potentially will be the beneficiary of some injection of funds, potentially from Elon Musk. What are your thoughts on how outside influences can change the political landscape in the UK, for instance?
I think our laws are out of date. That's the thing. We're still dealing with something that might have happened 8 years ago and there has not been an investigation. I think regarding tech, regarding financing, regarding lobbying, it's not really upfront. Who pays for people? Who keeps funding politicians? It's always quite secretive. You know, we know there are very influential people out there, but we never really get told exactly what's going on. And I think it's becoming much more upfront. Musk is just saying, I'll give you $100 million to make sure you become Prime Minister. Is that illegal? You know, or is it fine because if you bought a Tesla and you can do it via a UK company? I don't know. I'm not the expert.
Do you think that we are approaching dangerous times? You mentioned there whether a big injection of cash from an outside force into domestic politics, whether that's illegal or not. Do you think it should be? Do you think we need to be asking many more questions? I
think it's a really interesting question. It's always like, something's going to happen in the future. Are we approaching dangerous times? And I suppose what my film is trying to say, it's dealing with what's already happened in the past 10 years. And we deal with this idea of this event, this idea of somewhere in the future things changed and we went from democracy to fascism, or we went from democracy to a period of authoritarian rule. Honestly, we're the frogs in boiling water right now. I think it's all happening as we speak. While we're talking, something's happening. Something happened yesterday. We haven't quite dealt with what happened yesterday. Another thing will happen today, something else tomorrow. So for me, the whole thing is constantly shifting so fast, we can't keep up. You can't keep up. I definitely can't digest it all. And so, yeah, it's not a thing in the future. Climate disaster isn't in the future. We're in it.
President-elect Trump coming in January, he's promising to extend the Muslim ban to affect the highest deportation figures ever. How negatively do you view his presidency, or do you?
I mean, the clue is in the movie. There are a few scenes where he's featured in the film. You know, I'm not in a mad rush to go there. I work in the US a lot. I've worked there a lot. I've made movies there. But he's essentially saying lots of people are not welcome. So, and what happens in the US trickles down everywhere else. It influences global politics. You know, we know this. And so if he's OK doing it and everyone treats it like it's normal, then it's only going to happen everywhere else. So that's why I wanted to make the film. And like I said, I started the film 5 years ago when he had lost the previous election. And a lot of people in the US were saying, why is he in the film? That's old news. People are tired of him. He's gone. And I said, yeah, but the people who believe in what he was saying are still there. And here we are. The film comes out and he's back in power.
Is there any optimism in the film, any positivity, any hope?
I would say the hope comes every time I've shown the film. people want to talk. There's been a lot of amazing discussions about, well, what can we do? I've been feeling nervous, I've been feeling uncomfortable, I'm worried. And the idea of making a movie, it's a collective experience. You go to the cinema, you're with strangers, you're with your friends, your family, your loved ones, and every screening we've had, people talk because they want to know, what can I do? And I think there's always things you can do personally. There may be apps you want to delete off your phone. There may be places where you're given information. It may be that if you want to protect the NHS, you need to understand who are the company that are taking your data from the NHS and using it for whatever means they want, for AI or who knows what. So the film's trying to explain to you, you need to understand what's happening with your information, and we can all do something. And if nothing else, if you are interested by the journalists, Carol, Rana, and Maria featured in the film, read up more about them. If you like scary films, I'll give you a scary film, which is based entirely on fact. And then you can go away and think about, well, what do I personally need to do to change, to make things better for the next generation, rather than saying, the next generation are great, they'll solve all of our mistakes.
Filmmaker Asif Kapadia there. Well, thank you for joining us on The World this year, a year of elections and global conflicts. In January, we'll be weeks away from a new Trump presidency. As ever, we'll aim to bring you the full story about why it all matters. Yalda will be back on January the 6th. News at 10 with Barbara Serra is up next. Good night.